illegally entered the country legally and then simply overstayed their visa or visa waiver, whatever the case might be. So that has got to be a key part of this. Now, when it comes to addressing this, we can also go back and look at the last time we had major immigration reform. It was 1986. I wasn't in the Congress then. In fact, I was an immigration lawyer representing a lot of businesses that needed labor, some families as well. And in the midst of my work there, the Congress passed legislation to deal with the illegal immigrants who were in the country at the time. And they gave them what I would call an easy pathway to citizenship, and they promised that there would be enforcement so that there would be a legal process for people to come here who were needed here, people who were illegally here already would be taken care of, and the enforcement measures would take care of any future illegal immigration. Well, guess what? We did provide that easy pathway to citizenship to 3 million people, and we did not do the enforcement. So the message went forth in other countries that, hey, they did it once, maybe they'll do it again, and illegal immigration increased dramatically. At the same time, the people who were here working on farms, some of whom were not here lawfully, they got a green card. So when they got that green card lets you work anywhere. And agriculture is tough, hard work. When you've got a card that says you can get any kind of job you want to anywhere in the country, guess what? The American Farm Bureau will tell you that a third of our agricultural workforce left the farm and left agriculture in a lurch. So when we do this time, we can't make the same mistake. We can't take a program like the H-2A program, which is a bureaucrat's dream and a farmer's nightmare for how to provide your workforce. At the same time, we're not going to pass a law that allows for repeated replacement of permanent workers who get a green card and leave with a whole new large number of folks. So we've got to come up with a temporary worker program that works for farmers and all kinds of farmers. So that's what we set out to do in the House Judiciary Committee, and you can take a look at that bill. It's called the Ag Act. If you go to judiciary.house.gov, you'll get our website and you'll find the whole bill and a lot of information about it on the website. I encourage you to take a look at it. But the key features of this are that it makes very, very large numbers of people available. And we're open to, if we're not meeting the numbers, we're open to increasing them. In fact, the legislation gives discretion to the administration and to governors of individual states to increase agricultural workforces. But it's on a temporary basis, but a long-term temporary basis. You can initially be admitted for up to 3 years. And you don't have to do it by farm, by farm, by farm, which you have to do now. You get into the country with an agreement to provide agricultural work for an initial farm, and then you can go from farm to farm to farm providing the work that's needed. And for many types of farms, that is what's needed. You don't need that workforce all through the years. You only need it through the year. You only need it when you're harvesting your crop. But if you're in dairy, or if you're in poultry, and some other sectors, you need workforce constantly through the year. Well, that's a difficult thing because of the fact that they're not really temporary workers. We therefore make it a long period of time and then say you can renew initially the first time without having to go back home. But then in the future, you would have to touch base back home periodically. This is much better than the current program, which doesn't even work for you at all. But it's not as good as if you had a program where you got all the workers you needed all the time coming into the country. But I'll tell you, the general public is not going to support that kind of thing. And some have said, well, you know what? We would rather have our workers get a permanent status, a green card, and then if they leave the farm, well, we'll find some more. Well, those some more are probably going to be illegal workers. And if that's the case, and we do immigration enforcement first, and enforcement has gotten tighter already, but if it gets even more difficult in the future, you're really going to have a problem. So what we have said to all the different farm groups, some of which support my bill, some of which support the bill that's a part of the comprehensive Senate bill, we are happy to sit down and work with you and work through these problems to make sure that this is the best possible bill for farmers that can be passed through the Congress. It's passed through the Judiciary Committee. It's ready to go to the floor. As are those other three bills, two on enforcement. One deals with electronic verification of employment. One deals with interior enforcement of our laws. The Homeland Security Committee that has a bill. And we have one for high-skilled workers as well in the legal reform area. Those bills were all passed out of committee last year and haven't moved yet this year. Now, what is holding that up? Well, two things. One is the fact that the Senate bill, which has passed the Senate, has an easy, special pathway to citizenship for people who are not lawfully here. And a lot of people in the country have objected to that. They haven't said we don't want to, we're not saying we don't want to do anything about this, but they've said we want to see enforcement first, and we want to see some fairness in this. Now, when I was practicing immigration law back in 1986, my clients, who took sometimes months or years to go through the process and get the legal status that they needed for themselves, or if they were working for a company, for the workers of that company. And when that bill passed, 3 million people went right around them and got something, even though they were unlawfully present in the U.S. So there's a lot of resistance to that Senate bill for that reason. We've taken the step-by-step approach, and we'd like to take the additional steps. But in the midst of that, the President of the United States has gotten out his pen and his cell phone, and he said, I'm going to do some of this myself. So he started by taking a very sympathetic group, children who were brought here illegally by their parents, and said, I'm going to use a concept in the criminal law called prosecutorial discretion and put up to 1 million people through that process and give them discretion of not requiring them to leave the country. Well, prosecutorial discretion was never intended for that purpose. It's intended for that one tough case that the prosecutor says, boy, that's a really hard case. When you have 1 million people, what do? You have to go to the Congress and change the law. But when the President changes the law unilaterally, what happens is the people who like what he did, they said, well, we don't need to negotiate with the people who want more enforcement because we're getting what we want anyway through the President. And the people who want more enforcement, what they say is, well, we're not going to negotiate with the President because we can't trust him to enforce any new laws when he won't enforce the current laws. So that is the problem that has been created. And both parties need to step up, and both parties need to be willing to do immigration reform. But it does not help when the chief executive officer of the country, the person charged under Article 2 of the Constitution with the duty to take care to faithfully execute the laws. That's what it says in that article. Instead says, I've got my pen and my cell phone, and if you, Congress, don't do it the way I want it done, I'll do it myself. Now he's charged the Secretary of Homeland Security with taking it a step further and saying, well, what are we going to do in the administration about 11 million people? Are we going to enforce the law with regard to them? So hang on to your hats, folks. If he takes that further step, it's going to be even more difficult, if not impossible, to get legislation that you need to address your problems through the Congress. And now, because of the work he's already done, word's getting back down to Central America and other places, and we have children whose parents are paying $8,000 to a coyote to illegally bring them all the way across Mexico to arrive at our doorstep and apply for political asylum in this country. A year and a half ago, it was on an average of about 6,000 per year on an annualized basis. That was the trend. Now it is 10 times that number, and by the middle of next year, the projections are that we'll have 150,000 on an annualized basis, 150,000 per year coming to our country applying for political asylum. And when they get here, they take them in, they give them transportation to wherever, and they give them a court date to appear to come in to have a hearing on whether or not they are entitled to political asylum, which I can tell you 90% plus of them are not. And guess what? They never show up for that court hearing. That is a problem that has to be addressed as a part of all of this, and that's what's holding up the show. So let me mention two other things very quickly, since I know you want to talk primarily about this. But GT has been a great help in a problem that you have right here that we share in Virginia, because we're all a part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And the Chesapeake Bay is a national icon, an international icon. It is a wonderful thing, and its health is important to all of us. But the law, the Clean Water Act, says that when you deal with pollution issues with water that flows across state lines, the federal government gets to set the standards, and the state gets to determine what the method is to address those standards. And we've made a lot of progress. Sedimentation going into the bay is down by more than 50% over the last 25 years. Nitrogen and phosphorus is down by more than 40% over the last 25 years. And the health of the bay is improving, and it's improving pretty considerably. They've had record harvests of some shellfish in the past year. So at the same time, when Obama became president, one of the first things he did was sign an executive order saying, you know what, we don't like that way that the law says. And what we're going to do is we're going to empower the EPA to leverage Pennsylvania and Virginia and the other Bay states to say, if you don't write your plans the way we like them, we will penalize you, we'll punish you, we'll deprive you of other assets and resources that the federal government has. So thank you to the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau, the American Farm Bureau, the National Association of Home Builders, who've all stood up and filed a lawsuit challenging this. And just this week, yesterday as a matter of fact, I and a number of other members, including GT, signed an amicus brief filed with the court in support of the Farm Bureau's position on this. Now, I'll tell you how bad this situation is. The Virginia Attorney General, we have a new Attorney General who's not with it, in my opinion. He filed a brief on the other side in support of the EPA's position on this. The fact of the matter is that I don't know what it is for Pennsylvania, but for Virginia it's going to cost $16 billion to comply with the way the EPA and their Chesapeake Bay czar wants the health of the bay cleaned up. And they've done no cost-benefit analysis to show that when you do some of the things that they're going to require farmers to do, home builders to do, local governments through capturing water that flows down their streets have to put it through a sewage treatment facility just like you do sewage, when they have no showing that there's any significant improvement to the health of the bay by spending all that money, that's a serious problem for farmers. And we've gotten support from outside of this watershed because people know that this is the role model that the federal government is designing, and it's coming to a watershed near you if you don't live in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, but you folks do, and so I commend you for helping to stand up and fight that. And the other thing is with regard to dairy policy. You know, it's very important that people understand how unique dairy production is, because it is something that leads to changes in the market that can be pretty sudden, and you can't turn off a cow's milk production like you can stop an assembly line. So you've got to have programs that work to protect against that, and insurance against low cost and insurance against other problems is, in my opinion, the best way to go. But in the Farm Bill, there was a proposal offered by my friend, the Democratic ranking member from Minnesota, to instead empower the federal government, empower the Department of Agriculture to tell every single dairy farmer in America who signed up for insurance coverage how many cows they have to eliminate from their herd when prices fall. Now, you know, that's one way to respond to the issue of supply and demand, but it is not a way to grow the dairy industry in the United States. It's not a way to increase our exports around the world, because you've got to have a dependable supply, and if you're having bureaucrats decide when you've got to eliminate parts of your herd if you want to continue to participate in the program, that's not a good thing. And I agree with the speaker who called it Soviet-style dairy policy. So we were able to defeat that with a very, very overwhelmingly strong vote in the Congress and replace it with an enhanced insurance program that I think gives you better coverage and actually costs the taxpayers a little bit less, but addresses that program. Well, let me stop there, and I know you want to get back to the immigration discussion, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments or any